The rain did not merely fall that evening, it besieged the city. It hammered against the sleek, dark windows of the town car, turning the passing streetlights into fractured starbursts of neon and gray. For Alina, the rhythmic drumming against the glass was the only sound that mattered. It drowned out the memory of the boardroom, the unending negotiations, and the sterile hum of corporate survival. Her reflection in the window was a ghost, pale, composed, and impeccably put together, a mask she had worn for so long she had forgotten what lay beneath it. She needed the silence of the house. She needed the fortress she had built on the cliffs overlooking the bay. When the car finally idled at the curb, Alina stepped out, the chill of the damp air biting at her exposed skin. She moved with the practiced grace of a woman who never allowed the world to see her shudder. The front door of the house, a sprawling structure of concrete and glass designed by her late husband, Arthur, swung open with a heavy, reassuring thud. Inside, the air was different. It didn't smell of the city's exhaust or the damp pavement. It smelled of aged cedar, beeswax, and the lingering, metallic scent of the storm that had managed to seep through the vents. This house was a museum of her life, curated and kept pristine. It was vast, echoing with a minimalist beauty that bordered on coldness. It was also the only place where she felt safe to unspool the tension in her shoulders. Hold on just a moment before we continue. If this story is touching something in you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely makes a difference and helps me bring you more stories like this one. I also want to hear from you. Write in the comments, where are you right now? Are you tucked away in a peaceful village where stars fill the sky, or surrounded by the hum and glow of a city that never sleeps? She shared this glass fortress with Julian. He was Arthur's son from a previous marriage, though Alina had been the one to guide him from a turbulent adolescence into the quiet, brooding adulthood he now inhabited. Julian was 22 now, a student of cinema and archival history. Often retreating into the shadows of the house like a phantom, they existed in a peaceful, parallel orbit, two planets circling the black hole of Arthur's absence. Alina kicked off her heels, the sound of her stocking feet muted by the plush wool runner in the hallway. She expected the house to be dark, save for the low-level ambient lighting. She expected Julian to be sequestered in the West Wing, buried under mounds of film reels and textbooks. But as she rounded the corner toward the sunken living area, a flicker of blue, white light danced across the polished concrete walls. It was the large projection screen. It shouldn't have been on. She slowed her pace, her curiosity piquing. The light shifted, warming to a golden amber, casting long, moving shadows against the furniture. She took a step closer, peering over the railing that separated the foyer from the lounge. On the screen, towering 10 feet high, was a woman. She was laughing, her head thrown back, hair cascading like a dark river over bare shoulders. The camera loved her. It moved with a lover's gaze, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her neck, the spark of mischief in her eyes. The woman was radiant, unguarded, and painfully alive. It took Alina a heartbeat to realize she was looking at herself. But this was an Alina from 5 years ago. This was the Alina before the sickness, before the funeral, before the grief had calcified her heart. This was Arthur's muse. Julian sat on the floor, his back pressed against the leather sofa, knees drawn up. He wasn't moving. He was staring up at the screen with a terrifying intensity. The remote lay on the floor, just out of reach, as if he had lost the will to stop the reel. The audio was soft, but in the cavernous room it carried. Alina heard her own voice, breathless and teasing. "Put the camera down, Arthur. Come here." The intimacy of the moment felt like a physical strike. These were not home movies intended for holidays. These were the private archives, Arthur's studies of light and love, as he had called them. They were deeply personal, bordering on voyeuristic, capturing moments of morning disarray, late-night conversations, and the quiet, charged spaces between lovers. Alina felt a flush rise from her chest to her neck. "Julian." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient hum of the room. Julian flinched violently, his head snapping toward the sound. He scrambled to grab the remote, his fingers fumbling, hitting the mute button before finally killing the power. The room plunged into sudden, suffocating darkness, save for the distant city glow from the floor to ceiling windows. I didn't hear you come in," Julian stammered. His voice was thick, breathless. He stood up, but he looked trapped, his tall frame awkward in the sudden silence. Alina descended the stairs slowly, her hand gripping the railing. She needed to maintain control. She needed to be the parent, the guardian, not the exposed woman on the screen. "What are you doing, Julian? Where did you get those?" "I was archiving the hard drives," he said, looking down at his feet. for the retrospective. The gallery asked for more candid footage of Arthur's process. I was just scanning the folders. That was not footage of Arthur, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low register. That was me. I know, Julian whispered. He finally looked up, and even in the dim light, Elena could see the conflict in his eyes. There was guilt, yes, but there was also a lingering fascination that unsettled her. I opened the file by mistake, and then I couldn't look away. You looked so different. You looked happy. The words hung in the air, happy. It felt like an accusation. Those files are private, Elena said, her tone firm, drawing a line in the sand. They are not for the gallery. They are not for the public, and they are certainly not for you. I'm sorry, Julian said, and he sounded sincere. I didn't mean to intrude. It's just, sometimes it's hard to remember him without remembering how he looked at you. The camera was his eyes, Elena. Watching that, it felt like I was seeing you the way he did. Elena felt her resolve waver. She understood the hunger to feel Arthur's presence again. But this was a boundary crossed. Close the files, Julian, she said, turning away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze any longer. We will discuss the archive tomorrow. Go to bed. She didn't wait for his response. She walked past him, the scent of the rain on her clothes mixing with the tension in the room. She retreated to the master suite, closing the heavy oak door and locking it. The silence of her bedroom offered no comfort. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling slightly. The image of her past self burned in her mind. That woman, the one laughing, the one who was adored, felt like a stranger, driven by a sudden, masochistic impulse. Elena opened her laptop. She navigated through the encrypted folders until she found the same directory Julian had been watching. Subject E-Summer 2019. She pressed play. There she was. Sun-drenched, wearing only a silk robe, standing on the balcony of a hotel in Infinite Italy. The camera shook slightly as Arthur laughed behind the lens. The love in the frame was palpable. It wasn't just about her body, it was about her essence. Arthur had seen her as something precious, something vital. As she watched clip after clip, the shame began to recede, replaced by a hollow ache. She had been so loved. And in her grief, she had buried that version of herself, turning into a statue of marble and ice to survive the pain. Julian hadn't just been snooping. He had been searching for life in a house that had become a mausoleum. She fell asleep with the laptop open, the glow illuminating her tear-streaked face. The next day, the atmosphere in the house was brittle. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray, washed-out sky. Elena went to work, but her mind was elsewhere. She moved through meetings like an automaton, her thoughts constantly drifting back to the living room, to the screen, to Julian's dark, searching eyes. When she returned that evening, the house was quiet. She found Julian in the kitchen chopping vegetables. He paused when she entered, the knife hovering over a red pepper. I made dinner, he said quietly. Peace offering. Elena looked at him. He looked tired, dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes. He looked so much like his father in that moment that her heart gave a painful lurch. Thank you, she said softly. They ate at the small island counter, avoiding the formal dining table. The conversation was halting at first, mundane talk about the university, the leak in the roof, the gallery schedule. But the elephant in the room was too large to ignore. I watched the rest of it, Elena admitted, breaking a long silence. She swirled the wine in her glass, watching the red liquid coat the crystal. Julian stopped eating. You did?
Yes.
Last night. She looked at him directly. You were right, Julian. I was different then. I was lighter. You were beautiful, Julian said. The words rushed out unplanned. He stiffened, realizing the weight of what he had said. I mean, the composition, the way he captured you. It was art. It was love. Elena corrected him gently. But love and art were the same thing to your father. I miss him, said, his voice cracking. I feel like I'm forgetting his voice. But when I watched those videos, I could hear him breathing behind the camera. I could feel him. I know, Elena whispered. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. His skin was warm, his pulse rapid beneath her fingers. The moment stretched, thin and taut. The connection between them shifted. It wasn't just stepmother and stepson anymore. They were two survivors clinging to the same piece of wreckage. There is one real, Julian said, his voice barely audible. I didn't watch it. It was labeled the end. I didn't have the courage. Elena felt a chill. She knew the real. It wasn't the end of Arthur's life, but the end of their last trip together before the diagnosis. Do you want to watch it? Elena asked. The question surprised her. It was dangerous. It was an invitation to share a space that belonged only to her and Arthur. But she didn't want to be alone in the dark anymore. Julian nodded. They moved to the living room. The ritual felt solemn, almost religious. Elena sat on the sofa, and this time Julian sat next to her. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. The screen flickered to life. It was a sunset scene. The camera was set on a tripod this time. Arthur walked into the frame, sitting beside Elena on a driftwood log. The wind whipped her hair. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. They didn't speak to the camera. They just looked at the horizon, then at each other. The look they shared was one of profound, terrifying understanding. They knew, even then, that time was running out. On the screen, Arthur kissed her forehead, then her lips, a slow, lingering kiss that felt like a goodbye. In the living room, the air became heavy. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks, hot and fast. Beside her, she heard Julian's sharp intake of breath. Without thinking, she turned toward him. He was looking at her, not the screen. His eyes were wet, his expression raw. In the blue light of the projection, the years seemed to dissolve. He looked like Arthur. He looked like the man she had lost. Julian leaned in. It was a gravitational pull, unconscious and desperate. He was seeking comfort, seeking the ghost of his father in the woman his father had loved. And Elena, for a split second, leaned in too. She wanted to be held. She wanted to be adored again. Their faces were inches apart. She could feel his breath on her skin. The tragedy of their shared loss swirled around them, confusing the past with the present, grief with desire. But just as the distance between them threatened to close, the video ended. The screen went black. The sudden darkness broke the spell. Elena pulled back, gasping softly as if surfacing from deep water. She stood up abruptly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Elena," Julian whispered, reaching out a hand. "No," she said. Her voice was trembling, but it was clear. She stepped back, putting the coffee table between them. "No, Julian." She reached for the wall switch, flooding the room with harsh, yellow light. The shadows vanished, the ghosts retreated. Julian blinked, shielding his eyes, the vulnerability on his face instantly replaced by a dawn of realization and shame. I didn't," he started. "I know," Elena said, raising a hand to stop him. She took a steadying breath. "We are both looking for him, Julian. But we cannot find him in each other. That is a ghost we cannot chase." She looked at the young man before her. He was not Arthur. He was Julian. He had his own life, his own future, and she had been selfishly keeping him in this glass cage of memory, just as she had kept herself. "You need to leave," Elena said. Julian looked stricken. "Leave the house. Go back to the city near the university," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Take the apartment on the east side. Pack your things, not because I am angry, but because we cannot heal here. Not like this." She walked over to the console and ejected the drive. She held the small silver device in her hand, the sum of her past, the beautiful, painful evidence of a love that was gone. "This belongs in the vault," she said, "and we belong in the world." Julian stood up slowly. He looked at her with a new kind of respect. The boy was gone. A man stood in his place, one who understood the mercy of a boundary drawn in love. "You're right," he said softly. "I'll start packing in the morning. Good night, Julian. Good night, Elena." He walked up the stairs, his footsteps fading into the silence of the upper floor. Elena remained in the living room. She walked to the massive window and looked out at the bay. The storm had cleared completely. The moon was out, casting a silver path across the black water. She was alone. The house was quiet. But for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a clean slate. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, watching her reflection. The ghost was gone. The woman remained. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the air of the present. And finally, she turned off the lights.